Our final question today comes to us from a listener in Monrovia, California. It reads, "There are some who contend that God promises to Israel were on the condition, if you will obey my words and keep my statutes. These people say that after many failures, Israel was given a final chance to accept God's promises and gain his approval. They failed to keep their agreement at Sinai, and they failed to receive the one whom God had promised to send. At this time, God turned to the Gentile nations. These people believed that the prophecies concerning Israel were partially fulfilled when the Jews returned from their captivity in Babylon. They also believed that the book of Romans cannot be used to prove that the Lord will again return to Israel because of the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in AD 70. What's your opinion on this position?"
Now, may I say in answer to this that this is the position that, of course, is taken by the average denominational leader today. It is, of course, the position that eventuated in liberalism in the churches, not treating the promises God made literally, or not learning to make dispensational distinctions in the Bible. Now, it's to fail to distinguish between the unconditional covenants God made and the conditional covenants. Now, God made with Abraham an unconditional covenant that he'd give to his people that land forever. No strings attached to that. Now, their occupancy of the land, when they went in, depended upon their faithfulness and their keeping the Mosaic covenant. And their occupancy depended on that. They failed in that. They were put out of the land. And even in the book of Deuteronomy, we have set before us there the 3 times that these people are ejected from the land and are to be brought back into the land. They went out, of course, the first time when old Jacob took his sons down into Egypt. They went out in the Babylonian captivity. And then they went out again in 70 A.D. and through the Romans in the successive years after that. And from thence they've been scattered throughout the world. But each time they were told they would return. All of the prophecies have been fulfilled except their return from the 3rd captivity, and where they've scattered throughout the world. Now, the very fact that Romans was written before the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 A.D. has nothing in the world to do with whether God will return them back to that land or not. The question is, it's God's promises to Israel, to Abraham, and to the nation, and also to David, are these promises to be nullified? And the answer, of course, is no. And Romans 9, 10, and 11 reveal that God has not cast away his people whom he foreknew. And for that reason, you need to distinguish between a conditional and an unconditional promise of God. They're scattered because they did not keep the Mosaic law. But that did not destroy the promise made to Abraham. You see, all the way through, not only in Romans, but all the way through, why, we are told that these promises that God had made are yet to be fulfilled. Yonder in the Council of Jerusalem, as recorded in the 15th chapter, the book of Acts, you'll recall that even after they saw that God was to call out a people out of the Gentiles to his name, that after that he would return. And we read that James, he stood up and said, Simeon hath declared how God at the first did visit the Gentiles, to take out of them a people for his name. And to this agree the words of the prophets, as it is written. Now listen to this. After this. After what? After he calls out the Gentiles. After this, I will return. I'll build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down, and I will build again the ruins thereof, and I will set it up, that the residue of men might seek after the Lord, and all the Gentiles upon whom my name is called, saith the Lord, who doth all these things. Now, today God's calling out of the Gentiles a people to his name. After the church is completed and removed from this earth, then he turns again to the promises he made to David. The tabernacle of David is to be built up, and then all the Gentiles, not just some now, but all, will resort to Jerusalem to worship God. Now, this is just merely one of the literally hundreds of scriptures that are taken literally that are yet to be fulfilled, by the way.